We often assume our world of technology and relative peace is the default state of human affairs, but it isn't. For most of history, life was brutal and short. Civilization is not a guarantee. As Kenneth Clark lamented in 1969, however complex and solid it seems, civilization is actually quite fragile. It can be destroyed. Civilization is a delicate achievement that requires constant maintenance. When that maintenance fails, as it did during the fall of Rome, the darkness of illiteracy and violence becomes a historical norm once again. So that means that in order to maintain our civilization, each generation must do its part. Fathers and mothers must pass on accumulated wisdom to their children, and when those children grow up, they must do the same in turn. Now today, Gen Z is the next generation to take the mantle. If you're in this group, you're beginning to have an impact on society at large. But this is a great responsibility and also a great challenge because our civilization is seemingly in such a fragile state. Rome fell because it hollowed itself out, leaving the door open for collapse. Today, we suffer from what I like to call presentism. We're hypnotized by the current news cycle while treating the past as irrelevant. However, a society severed from its history is like having a blind man at the wheel of a Ferrari, unable to recognize the dangers ahead while putting a highly sophisticated machine in peril. Historical literacy is not an academic exercise then. It is a matter of civilizational insurance. It is the only way to heed the warnings before it is too late. I want to show you why, even as a seemingly advanced society, collapse is never far off. And it is only by understanding history that we can predict our future and arm ourselves with the tools to become great men and women of consequence. So here are 3 ways that understanding history will change the way you see the world, and hopefully help you play a part in solving the challenges we face today. The first reason is that understanding history acts as a warning system for decline. We can only understand the state of our current civilization in light of the cycles of history. To the casual observer, we are wealthy, well-fed, and entertained. Life is good, right? But to the historical mind, cracks are everywhere. One only needs to read a classic like Edward Gibbon's The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire to see them. Gibbon basically performed a civilizational autopsy. He discovered that Rome didn't necessarily suffer a sudden death from a single powerful blow. Rather, it eroded over centuries. The warning signs, currency debasement, reliance on mercenaries, political instability, a widening gap between rich and poor, and plummeting birth rates, were all present. Yet most Romans failed to notice as they continued their daily lives nearly uninterrupted. Gibbon called this the natural effect of immoderate greatness. Success bred a complacency that made self-correction impossible. Why sacrifice for the common good when prosperity feels guaranteed? This is precisely how decline arrives unannounced through the path of least resistance. This pattern is not unique to antiquity, of course, and the symptoms Gibbon identified probably ring a bell to you. Other cultures have undergone the same cycle, and the signs are present in our own civilization. Rampant inflation, a faltering middle class, and plummeting birth rates are all too common news items in the West today. Historical literacy serves as an early warning system for these symptoms, though. The person who has studied Gibbon or the collapse of the Weimar Republic possesses a pattern recognition that others lack. They realize that we are not fundamentally different from the Romans. They too assumed that because their world had always endured, it always would. They were wrong. Okay, so history provides a detection system for failure, but it also offers a blueprint for survival, which is the second reason you need to understand history. History shows us how civilizations endure. Only when they treat their survival as a serious problem to be solved each and every day do societies make it through the many great filters that stand in their way. One example is the long-lasting Byzantine Empire. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the East thrived for another 1,000 years. The Byzantines survived because they understood that civilizations require active maintenance. For instance, in the late 11th and early 12th century, they reformed their military after a series of territorial losses. They knew something had to change. Likewise, they shifted their official language from Latin to Greek to better reflect their on-the-ground reality. Necessity drove them to adapt as they understood their institutions to be fragile tools requiring constant updating. But the key is that they still maintained the institutions themselves and didn't throw them out altogether. Ancient China provides another example in continuity. For over 4,000 years, a Chinese civilization remained intact. A primary reason for this resilience was the imperial examination system. This system was the process of selecting government officials based on rigorous testing of Confucian classics. By tying political power to a shared cultural touchstone, China ensured that its ruling class shared a unified historical memory. Thus, the core identity of society endured, even if a particular dynasty fell. The contrast of these cultures with the post-Roman West is sobering. When Rome fell, Western Europe lost its cultural continuity. Literacy plummeted, and the recovery of lost knowledge took centuries. As Will Durant observed, civilization is not inherited. It has to be learned and earned by each generation anew. History shows us the outline for civilizations who survived. The societies that flourished across centuries were those that prioritized cultural transmission across generations. The habits that make civilized life possible are not a given, and we should not take them for granted. The question for us today is not whether we are currently successful, but whether we are still making the active choice to remain so each and every day. Are we transmitting our culture to the next generation? The last point I want to make is how studying history affects you as an individual. Because only strong individuals have the ability to make a real impact outside themselves. So number 3 is that history shows us what's possible. I talked about this in a recent video, but I want to re-emphasize it because it's so important. Machiavelli wrote that the best way to better yourself is by studying the great men and women of history. We learn by imitation, so choose a model and copy their successes and avoid their vices. Napoleon modeled himself after Julius Caesar. Caesar aspired to be Alexander the Great, and Alexander envisioned himself as a new Achilles. Machiavelli writes, "The fact is that although people almost always proceed by imitation, following in another man's footsteps, you can never tread a model's path or reproduce his qualities exactly. So if you're sensible, you set out to follow a trail blazed by someone who is truly great, someone really worth imitating, so that even if you're not on the same level yourself, at least you'll reflect a little of his brilliance." Thomas Carlyle thought the same, and his theory of history, the great man theory, posited that history was shaped by the few, not the many. World history was but the biography of great men. But he believed all of us can benefit from their study. By examining the lives of great men, we develop courage and our own unique vision. Studying heroes will make us a little more heroic. To wrap this up, studying history provides the pattern recognition necessary to see that our world is not the default state of affairs, and also that you are not all you could be. History is a looking glass that shows us the possibilities of our civilization and ourselves. To ignore it is to content ourselves with merely being observers rather than determined shapers of our civilization. To embrace the past, learn from the greats of history, and use this inherited wisdom to forge a stronger path for yourself and our civilization.